Hello. Hey, Brian.
Hey,
Great to have you on.
thanks so much for having me. Happy Monday.
And what's the idea? Why are you and I talking today? Did we think about that already, or is it just like random chat?
I mean, we had a really good chat. I want to say a couple weeks ago, just on automation and CI/CD, and then I think the consensus was that we probably should have recorded that from the beginning, which we didn't do. And then we were like, oh, we both have a YouTube channel. Like, we should probably make content together. But of course, the content creators didn't record the session that they had that was actually really enlightening for like both of us, right? So I think it was random happenstance meets good opportunity meets good people and good vibes. That's what I feel.
Yeah, and that's what I feel as well. And even better is that we both share one thing, I think, which is we love learning in public. So we're not ashamed of things that we do wrong, and we love sharing that as well. So let's just see if we can share some of our experiences from the last weeks with people watching this one, right? And then maybe we can encourage people to also share their learning in public experiences that they've had, because I think that's really one of the things that helps others most is see the failures or the problems that people have, right? Because then they will not make those mistakes. And maybe, I don't know, maybe let's start with that conversation that we had a couple of weeks back. I think, if I remember correctly, it started off with you showing me something that you were doing.
So I was How did that start up? I think I was messaging about like infrastructure as code, or I was like building an app or something like that, and then I think you were asking like, oh, did I like automate the workflow or something like that, and then I was like, oh, I was thinking about it, but I like hadn't. I think this was in the AWS Slack or something like that, and then
I think so too. And I think it was about you had some infrastructure as code and you were applying it manually, and I asked like, how do you apply that? How do you make those changes?
It was for the
how
API.
Do you manage that, right?
It was like a completely separate project from the app. It wasn't app, right? It was API related. And oh yes, it was the file uploads to S3. So I was building an API. It's all coming full circle. So I was building API because what I wanted to do was create sort of this testimonial. So like I get testimonial for Tech Stack Playbook, like a course or a program or something like that, and then that gets thrown into Typeform. But then I want to like have that end up in S3 and Dynamo, and then be able to then show that onto one or more different websites or different domains. So I had the serverless.
And you were literally going to the AWS console and uploading that file manually, regularly, right? I think that's how we.
And then you were like, Brian, like, let's jump on a call and like let's talk about it. I was like, okay, like that's kind of forward, but I like the vibe. But I think that call, I'm actually really grateful for that you took the time to do that, because I think you saw like a block that I didn't see, where I was like, oh, I can totally automate this like later on, but I just want to get it to work. And I've been really thinking about that, because that's now like 3 weeks ago at this point. It really got me thinking about like everything should be automated. Like if you are wasting time to do something manually that you do regularly, if you just have the script to do X, you could just like do that automagically every single time correctly without fail. So hugely eye-opening.
That's something that Thorsten has been, Thorsten Höger, he's also an AWS DevTools Hero, right? And he has been advocating that for a while also, like automate all the things. That means anything that you don't do in a manual fashion is good, because you don't need to think about it, right? So he's been also pushing that a lot in terms of, you need to automate everything that you do, regardless how big or how small it is, right? And Alan as well, he's been Alan Helton. He's been automating a lot of his social media stuff and marketing stuff as well, right? So that's also pretty cool in terms of how do you share content on different sites and different social media sites and these kind of things. And that's amazing what he did there. And I'm trying to build on top of that some cool stuff that I've been working on, right? That I don't want to yet talk about publicly, right? But he's really also an automation guy. And the more that you automate, I think the easier it becomes.
because then that's when you're automating systems, that means you have more time to build, also learn new things too. So yeah, I mean, it was, and even if it was just dragging and dropping files into S3, like it wasn't a big thing, but then it made me think about, okay, well, how would I be able to do this? Or what if I needed to add versioning for like certain files, right? And then now I'm just doing something very manual. I don't know as much as, like, I'm not thinking ahead of those types of use cases. But if I just had a pipeline where it's just commit, upload, and it's always the same thing every time, then it takes like that guesswork. It reminds me of there's like that Mark Zuckerberg I don't know, it was like expose where it talked about how like he always wears the same thing every day because it takes out that mental load where you can just execute.
Was that Mark Zuckerberg? I thought that was the Google and the Apple guy that
Steve Jobs anymore. Tim Cook.
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs that had that. Like he always had the same trousers put on.
Yeah.
Right.
Just because works,
one decision less a day, right? Yeah, exactly. And if you don't need to decide, then that's better because every decision that you need to take takes away some brain power. That's what he always said, I think.
So that's where.
So Brian, Go ahead.
I was gonna say like that conversation that we had like got me think more into like it got me thinking more of how do I think about this, but not just on like production workloads, because I think like for work production workloads totally automated you need that, but I think it was like for a side project or you have like a dev version of your project and then you're gonna also have a prod version, like how do you reconcile that? And I think my hesitation was I'll just automate it later. But I literally was just talking about that in my security talk. Reinforce was like, that's the same mindset where, you say like, oh, I'll worry about security later. And we've heard that like so many times before of like, oh, we'll worry about security when we scale. Oh, it's not a problem right now. It'll be a problem later. And if we have to worry about security later, then we've done something right, or whatever. But it's kind of like, if you just figure it out from the beginning, it's a little bit of a time investment up front, but you can actually like get ahead. And the hesitation was even for like my own stuff, I like always try to manage like server hours or build minutes. And then I found out for GitHub for Pro, you get like 3,000 build minutes a month. I'm like, you have to really try to use that. That is true. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So did you then change the way that you're uploading that file to S3, or how are you doing it now?
Yeah. So that project actually got put on hold because I had to do like some other things. But I started building with SST to build Next.js apps. So that was a little bit more of like a pressing thing. That other project kind of like put on hold. Like it works, but then I needed to like figure out some other stuff, and I was like, oh, this is like way more pressing. But what's really cool was taking basically the Ubuntu server that GitHub like gives you with like build minutes to then automate basically your Next.js application. So I ran into an issue because I was using serverless framework for the app project, and then I was like, oh, could I automate Next.js builds? And you can up to Next 14, but not with App Router. So then I really struggled to try to find a way to build the project because every time it would fail, like in like the CI/CD pipeline. So then I learned that there was this other framework called SST, which has it's a Next.js site CDK construct that then basically puts your Lambda functions on edge and it wraps your whole application, but you could put it cloud front, all the good things. And then I used GitHub Actions as a deployment script to do that. And another cool thing that I did was using Amazon Code Guru to be able to analyze and scan over your code. So that's like another workflow that I added. So it's like all automated. It like will just run. It's really cool. And I was like, this feels like superpowers. Yes, I would do this for work, but I was like, for a side project, I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of extra, but very effective for what I need to do. So yeah, I've been loving it. Been vibing.
So you're gonna do more than that, and it's what I'm.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like now I need to
you're gonna do more. I
feel like I'm wasting thousands of build minutes. So it's like for me, it's like that college student mindset of like I want to like leverage all that I can like for free or like for if I'm paying for something, like let me like use every last drop that I have of something, to be resourceful. But yeah, that it's just it made me realize that there's a lot of things that I can automate and there's a lot of things that should be automated, but you might not think about it because you go, oh, this is just a side project. But if you're intentionally building something for an end user or end users, it's like, okay, we're already past this being a test project. We're already past dev. Like, you should be thinking about that. And CDK also having stages, so that's really helpful too, because then when I'm like passing a stage up,
CDK, you mean CDK pipelines, right? So that specific implementation of CDK pipelines, which translates to GitHub Actions and or code build.
Code not necessarily the code pipeline, but more like just with SST, so you can like deploy something with like stage dev. Okay. And then that will like create resources within CloudFormation template. That's so from what I understand, it will create like nested stacks, but they're different. So you'll have like your dev resources, but that'll be separate from your stage prod, so your prod CloudFormation template. So I've been really liking SST, how it abstracts that, because then when I'm locally developing something, I'm only using dev. But then when I like what I've done, then I commit that to prod. And then it will auto build the whole CloudFormation template, update, delete, create all the resources as I have on the dev branch. So you make a PR and then it'll automate that. But instead of you doing it locally, you have that run in GitHub Actions. And then now but like, yes, you'll be like doing dev stuff locally. It's just you get the dev working and then you make a commit, or you commit that, do your PR to your prod or your main branch. And then that will build the prod version of your CloudFormation template.
Yeah, so I do even have usually 3 environments at least if I do my own self-built projects, right? So I have a sandbox environment that I deploy from my local, and then I have development and production, right? And obviously, you only want to do that if you have a very low or minimal run rate for the application deployment, right? So if you're doing serverless, that's pretty cheap. But if you need to bring up 3 EKS clusters or Kubernetes clusters, then you definitely have a problem, right? So that's where I use that for serverless deployments.
That's awesome.
As well. Okay, so you learned GitHub Actions a bunch in the past few weeks. That's what I'm hearing.
And again, like I've used GitHub Actions like through work with clients with those types of things, but I think there's like code that can be just like generated, and maybe you contributed to like some of the YAML file somebody else did, or like somebody wrote a YAML file for you and then you just add that to the repo, or you're just given something. So I've worked like directly and tangentially with GitHub Actions, but I think the idea of consciously starting a project with GitHub Actions is something that it's just felt always like a oh, I'll do this later, or like this will be incorporated later. So doing it from the beginning was something that I would say was like a little bit of like a new mindset shift, because it's like yeah, it's like there's like the emphasis, right? You want to get the code to work, you want to get it to run, but then you're like, okay, like let me like kind of like the whole idea of like shift security left. It's like shift automation and CI/CD left. So like we're doing those things like much earlier in the dev process, so that like when you're already running things to prod, it's like we already have these workflows are already running. Yeah, you might not, like if you're experimenting with stuff, like you might not want to just burn a bunch of minutes just like testing something until you actually know that it works. But it's that idea of shifting it left or earlier in the process was kind of like a new really like a revelation. That sounds dramatic, but like just like a new thought process, a new way of thinking.
Yeah, so at the community day in Germany in 2023, I was fortunate to give a talk over there, and I had this slide. Let me bring that up. So, where is it? I had this slide, and I hope that this is big enough, right? Where I actually said, traditionally in projects, you want to reach the state where you're 100% automated. Traditionally, we start with the red line, right? We start with kind of no automation, then we reach a release state, and then we get to automation, potentially because we have defects and problems. Now, what I proposed in the talk, and I'm not going to go through the whole talk, was like, okay, you should invest in automation first, and then gradually do less automation, but that gives you the possibility to react faster and react better on incidents and defects that you get to, right? But with helpers being predefined CI/CD pipelines or automation steps that you can use, you can even get better, right? Because you can directly kick off like 50%. You're going to need to do customizations. I understand that. But to be honest, most of our software projects, they are always the same, right? They have an infrastructure piece, they have an application piece, they have maybe a backend and a front end, but you can automate all of that depending on the language that you choose. So if you're in Python, if you're in TypeScript, you can always have the same steps being included in the pipeline. Having those good pipelines with security built in, with automation and testing built in, and offering that as a best practice template, I think that's where we as a community need to be better at, right? And that was a slide, I think, that makes a lot of sense, at least to me, right? Where we can see that these kind of little helper things can make the lives of people easier. And I would love that. I would love to have that for all types of projects.
No, I love that. I feel like sometimes for like the test projects, I become red. Like I'm that red line. But then I realize that I actually like what I built. And then I'm like, wait a second, now I need to be blue. But I already need to have been blue like yesterday. So now I need to like shift up and like add the customizations. So I definitely resonate with that chart. You know, because it's kind of like if you're doing like a work product, you're like, oh, okay, like this is like, we need to do all the bells and whistles from the very beginning. But then it's the projects that you start experimenting with. And then you're like, oh, there's actually value to this. Like I could actually use this. Maybe like, I didn't expect it to work like this, or like this is really cool. Now you're like, wait, why didn't I just do this from the very beginning? So I like that whole approach of like, we want to get 100% automated. Or at least like, I'll take like 90% automated. Like it doesn't need to be like always that, but I know you know this. So I started like all my AWS development through the Amplify framework, and like that, it makes it so easy to just do the things. But then you're wondering about it, like how do they do the automated CI/CD pipelines? How do they do the staging stuff? And then that was kind of the biggest, I'd say, like learning growth thing for me, at least from the last year and a half, was like there will be some times where like Amplify, like we might want to use that just to like quickly get spun up. But if we really need to do way more complicated architectures, we want to do way more types of deployment patterns, then it sort of becomes this mystery box of, well, how did they set all this up? You know, and yes, they have like teams of engineers that have spent weeks, months, years. I think probably maybe a decade at this point, probably putting in towards like a framework like this. So it's kind of like they have a lot of things that work that are really great if you like take time to use it. But then if you need to build your own type of project, or, you know, you need to add WAF, you know, shield, do some sort of, I don't know, like put it on a VPN or like VPCify certain resources and lock everything down, then you'll find that you'll need to build your own stuff. So then it's like for custom things, right? Yeah, so that's where for me, I was like, so how do you do that? How do you automate it? Like, and I remember like my very first application for like a hackathon project, like circa like, I don't know, like 4 years ago or whatever. I learned about CI/CD through Netlify, where it was like you build it and then it has that hook, and then it's connected to your private repo, and then it'll just auto build your app to a domain. And it's like when you start with that, you're like, oh, like CI/CD pipeline, but it's managed. So if you needed to like construct your own pipeline, how do you do that if you've never done that before, right? So that was a lot of my exploration, was like, okay, like now I really need to start learning these services that maybe I take a little bit for granted. How do I actually build those things on my own so that I'm not dependent on a framework or a certain tool or and not to name names, but not within the AWS realm, but there's like those CI/CD pipelines where they might change like the pricing, or they might say like now private repos aren't supported for our specific build pipeline. So then now you're like, okay, well now I need to figure out another alternative because this is now cost prohibitive for me to do it a certain way. So it's I was gonna say it's not an AWS company, but it's like outside of that realm. And I remember that of like, okay, well now I can't do it this way because I'm sure everybody was doing it this way, and the company was probably losing a lot of money, like not charging. So can't fault them for that. But for me, it's like if I need another alternative, I need to build another system. How do I do that?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Brian, we love to talk both. We're already 20 minutes. I would propose let's park our conversation here. Let's get back soon together to talk about more learnings that we did in public and share that with the community. So
I'd love that. Yeah, I'm ready. Like,
cool.
sign me up. Where do I sign up?